of royalty took 70 days. The internal organs were removed through a small incision in the abdomen. The brain was removed through the nose. The body was then dehydrated in a salt called natron. And finally, it was anointed with spices and sacred oils before it was wrapped and placed in an elaborate coffin. But unknown man E doesn't look anything like a royal mummy. These 120-year-old photos are all we have. There is no one alive who has ever seen him. If a genie were to grant me any 3 mummies I could examine, unknown man E would be the first. Today, here in Cairo, my wish is being granted. The genie of Egyptian antiquities is Dr. Zahi Hawass, Secretary General of the Supreme Council of Antiquities. He's responsible for all of Egypt's ancient monuments, every tomb, temple, mosque, and mummy.
Good to see you, my friend.
Now I have his permission to study unknown man E.
Life is still good?
It wasn't easy finding the mummy. For 100 years, he's been lying in the Egyptian Museum in Cairo, untouched, inside the coffin he was buried in. Once we take him down, there's a wave of excitement. Even for the Egyptian museum staff, this is a big deal. They've never seen him either, and everyone wants a peek. They've screened off a room for me, and right from the start, there's lots of discussion.
We're going to look at his ears, we're going to go look at his show no incision.
That's the coffin he was buried in. It's unmarked, not a single hieroglyph to indicate his identity. It's a real mystery. I can't tell you how revved I am. I've waited years for this. Finally, I'm going to be face to face with the ancient Egyptian I've been tracking for years. But I'm not there yet. After 100 years, unseen by anyone, he could be just a pile of dust. I'm home free. He looks good. Better than I expected. But before we look at him, let me show you his coffin. Even that's a mystery.
When they put this mummy in the coffin, he's a little too big. His shoulders are wide. Remember, he was wrapped. So they hack it away just to put him in. They're working fairly quickly. He's a big man, it's a small coffin, and they're trying to accommodate. Now, it's a nice piece of cedar. I mean, this is pretty expensive stuff, but look at the foot of it. Look at the end. What they've had to do is hack out this part. They've had to make it longer so that they can fit the mummy in. So I think it's a good coffin used for someone else, and now it's reused for unknown man E.
It's not easy moving a fragile 3,000-year-old mummy.
And then,
in the case of unknown man E, no one has touched him in 100 years. And we don't know just how delicate he is. Watch how they do it. They're pros. Lots of hands support the body, so the weight is distributed. You don't want stress concentrated in one area, or you can wind up with a broken mummy. Before I examine the mummy, I want to see what Zahi Hawass thinks of him. He's seen just about everything.
it's good.
I would say that this mummy is amazing, and it's this is my first time to see it, actually.
Mine too.
The hair.
You know,
got these braids. Have you seen anything like
the
that?
first thing that really shocked me when I looked at this mummy is how the hair looks like. I've never seen a mummy like this. And it's fascinating. It's better than the complete mummified mummies.
Yes.
Look at the face, look at the position of the hands. Maybe it's late New Kingdom. Yeah.
He's got an earring. He had an earring. You can see the hole over there.
Yeah, I could see that.
Is that a sign of status?
Yes, royal status. We know in the New Kingdom that the ears is open for boys and girls.
From the 18th dynasty.
From the
on.
18th
So it's after
dynasty
that
on.
for sure.
After that for sure. And therefore I feel this could be late New Kingdom.
Late New
Maybe Dynasty 20, maybe Dynasty 21st. In the time there was conspiracies and there was kind of trouble in Egypt at that time.
Denied the careful mummification given to royalty, unknown man E was unceremoniously sewn into a rough sheepskin and placed in an unmarked coffin. Most shocking, his hands and feet were bound. Some think he was buried alive and died screaming in agony.
Coming up, we uncover our first clues to the identity of unknown man E and how he came to rest with the great kings of Egypt.
Unknown man E is the most mysterious mummy in Egypt, but we've uncovered some clues to his identity. Let's look. Buried with gold earrings indicates a high status, possibly royal. On the other hand, no embalmer's incision, not carefully mummified. Buried in a sheepskin, a sign of disgrace in ancient Egypt. So how did this strange mummy, a mix of prince and pauper, end up being buried with the greatest kings of Egypt? Dr. Hawass has provided a very important clue. Our mummy dates from the 20th dynasty, around 1200 BC, a time of turmoil and conspiracy. If we're going to identify unknown man E, we must go back in time to the place where unknown man E lived and died. But don't think pyramids. The 20th dynasty is long after the pyramids of Giza were built, when the religious capital of ancient Egypt was south, in ancient Thebes, modern Luxor. Set on a bend of the river Nile, this is where the pharaohs of Egypt built their great temples. Luxor Temple, with its colossal statues and soaring obelisks. Karnak, the greatest temple in the world, built over a period of 2,000 years by more than 100 pharaohs. The Ramesseum, built so the pharaoh Ramses the Great could be worshipped forever. And when they died, the pharaohs were buried in the Valley of the Kings, near the boy king, Tutankhamun. Now, the great pharaoh of unknown man E's time was Ramses III. I think Ramses' life and tragic death will reveal the identity of unknown man E. So what do we know about Ramses? Well, just look at the temple he built. Today, it's called Medina Habu, but in Ramses' time, it was called a mansion of millions of years. This is where Ramses would be worshipped after his death like a god. It's one of the most popular stops for tourists in Egypt. Look at it, it's huge. And there's Ramses, greeting you. He's the one holding all the captives by their hair, and he's about to whack them on their heads with his mace. That's how he wanted to be remembered. You see, during Ramses' early years as pharaoh, foreigners were trying to invade Egypt. First came the Libyans, and Ramses defeated them and put all the gory details on the walls of his temple. Think of it. More than 60,000 people worked for this temple. This was a major corporation, the largest temple ever built by one pharaoh. And if unknown man E is really royal, he would have walked these corridors. He would have known Ramses. But in spite of all of Ramses' successes, the great temple, defeating the Libyans, and vast donations to the gods, Ramses' reign ended with intrigue, tragedy, and murder. How could this happen to the pharaoh, a living god? And what part did unknown man E play in all this? Well, the clues are on the walls of Ramses' temple. Can you see what's going on up there? Ramses is tickling one of the ladies under her chin. And there are some other pretty ladies. Over there's a queen. This is where Ramses partied with the women of his harem. And this is where all his troubles began. This was a king with a lot of women. But don't forget, women were powerful in Egypt. Think about it. Everyone can name an Egyptian queen. Nefertiti, who became an icon of beauty. Cleopatra, the last ruler of Egypt. In Egypt, queens had real clout. It looks like Ramses' problems all started with the ladies of his harem. They were vying for power. Come with me to the Valley of the Queens, and I'll show you how unknown man E and Ramses' harem became entangled in a web of murder and intrigue. In ancient times, the Valley of the Queens was called Ta Set Neferu, the place of the beauties. The tombs are every bit as beautiful as in the Valley of the Kings. Our first clue is a badly damaged tomb off limits to tourists.
This is what I'm looking for. This is Ramses' favorite wife, Isis. Normally, there was only one top banana in the harem, the Hemet Weret, the great wife. But she doesn't have that title. It just says Nebet Tawi, mistress of the two lands. Ramses didn't pick just one. That was his problem.
A pharaoh could have dozens of women in his harem, but to avoid trouble, he usually chose one that was above all the others, his great wife, and she had all the power. Ramses didn't do that, and it may have cost him his life. Queens aren't the only ones buried here. The royal princes were also laid to rest in the Valley of the Queens, and our murder may have been over which prince would succeed Ramses.
That's one of the sons of Ramses. His name was Chaim Wasit. It means shining in Thebes. You see the sidelock of youth? He died while he was a child. And the feather? That shows he was a prince. Ramses had dozens of sons. Lots of sons, lots of queens. That's what the competition was about. Which queen's son would be the next king of Egypt?
Isis's son was next in line to be king. But remember, she didn't have the title Great Wife, and so didn't have status over the other wives. And another queen, Tea, was determined to put her son, Pentawera, on the throne. Remember his name. We'll be coming back to him. But how was Tea going to pull this off?
Coming up.
This document gives us the details of one of the darkest episodes in 3,000 years of Egyptian history.
How would you go about killing the most powerful man on Earth? And what was unknown man E's part in the plot?
We've been tracking unknown man E and his role in a 3,000-year-old murder conspiracy. How do we know all this?
I've got a papyrus somewhere here that I want to show you. It's over here. Now, this doesn't belong here, wait. No. This is it. It's an official court record, and it tells how Tea, a butler and a treasurer, used magical spells and wax figures to murder the king of Egypt. It's absolutely unique. The Egyptians never recorded palace intrigues, but this document gives us the details of one of the darkest episodes in 3,000 years of Egyptian history. And with it, I think we can discover the identity of unknown man E and piece together his role in the conspiracy.
How do you go about killing Pharaoh Ramses, the most powerful man on Earth? Remember, he built that fabulous temple, defeated the Libyans, and made lavish donations to the gods? Well, those were the good times, the first 15 years of Ramses' reign. But towards the end, things seemed to fall apart. Traitors among his staff were plotting to kill their pharaoh. Queen Tea's son, Prince Pentawera, was not in line to be pharaoh, so she hatched a plot to kill poor old Ramses, seize the throne, and make her son king. This is what the murder was all about, a queen plotting for her son to become king of Egypt.
It was a complicated plot, like something out of an Agatha Christie novel. And I'll tell you who did it. The butler. He was a sneaky character named Paibak Amun. But he wasn't alone. These corridors were full of people trying to kill Ramses.
And the papyrus tells us they were going to start with magic. Everyone in ancient Egypt believed in magic. They used it just like we use antibiotics today. They believed magic was the most powerful tool they had and used it every day for all kinds of things. When a pharaoh went into battle, he made little clay images of his enemy, and then he smashed them to ensure victory on the battlefield. Magic had its dark side too, and that's what the conspirators were using to murder Ramses. The butler, Paibak Amun, helped obtain the magical wax figures and spells that were used to immobilize the palace guard. This was such potent magic that when the scribes were writing the court record, they were very careful not to record the spells, lest they bewitch themselves. Wax figures were central to the plot. The court record says one of the conspirators began to make people of wax, inscribed, hindering one troop and bewitching others. They were using magic to gain access to the very heart of the palace, to kill Pharaoh Ramses. But magic alone wasn't enough. They then turned to the gods of ancient Egypt for help. Queen Thea, the butler, and the treasurer were getting very close to the moment when they would kill the pharaoh. But first, they had to consult an oracle statue. This was very risky business. The gods were as closely guarded as Pharaoh's gold, and in order to get anywhere near one, the conspirators had to be well connected. They had to make their way through gate after gate, past innumerable guards, till they were deep in the temple, in the Holy of Holies, where the god resided. A sacred space, off limits to all but the high priests. What exactly was their goal? A statue that could tell their future.
I bet you're wondering how a statue can tell the future. This battered papyrus shows you how. You see the bald-headed guys? They're priests. Priests always shave their heads. And they're carrying the oracle statue on poles. But it's hidden. It's inside this shrine. It was so powerful, you couldn't look directly at it. But you could ask it questions. Now, if the answer was yes, supposedly, the statue magically increased its weight, forcing the priest carrying it to bend down. And that's how you got your answer. Now, we know the conspirators consulted an oracle statue, but we don't know the question they asked. But my bet is they asked it, will our plot succeed?
Well, the oracle must have given them some encouragement, because the queen, the butler, and the treasurer put their plan into action. This wasn't just a couple of malcontents with a dagger. Some of the most powerful people in Egypt were plotting to kill Ramses.
Up next, our ancient murder mystery continues. How the queen, the butler, and the treasurer plotted to kill their pharaoh.
This is the victim, Ramses III.
Our search for the identity of unknown man E has led us to a murder conspiracy. The queen, the butler, and the treasurer were plotting to kill their pharaoh, Ramses III. So far, the conspirators have enlisted the help of the palace elite, fashioned magical images to immobilize the pharaoh's guards, and consulted the oracle statue to see if their plot will succeed. The court record tells us they had one final step, and that involved stealing a papyrus from Ramses' library.
They were probably looking for something like this. It's a magical calendar that tells you what days are good for action and what days are bad. It's kind of like looking up your daily horoscope in the newspaper, only much more powerful. This was just for the elite. That's why it was guarded. Let me show you how it works. This is the papyrus. And you see these hieroglyphs here? They say don't even go out of the house on this day. That was a bad day. But here, these 3 hieroglyphs, they say very good. Anything you attempt on this day will succeed. So now our conspirators had the ideal day on which to make their move.
The papyrus doesn't give us the details of what happened after the queen, the butler, and the treasurer sprang into action. It was so unthinkable that a pharaoh could be murdered that the details of his death would never be recorded. All we know is that 12 days after the attempt on his life, Ramses ascended to the heavens. The king was dead. The conspirators had succeeded. But after 3,000 years, we might be able to figure out how they killed him. We have the victim's body. Ramses was found in the incredible cache of royal mummies, along with unknown man E. Let's do an autopsy.
This is the victim, Ramses III. You can see there's no obvious signs of trauma to the head. His eyes have been packed to give him a kind of realistic look in the next world. And if you look at his ear, you'll be able to see that he's got a hole in his ear in exactly the same place as unknown man E. So they're possibly from the same period. Now, he was never unwrapped fully. When they removed the wrappings from the head, it was very difficult, so they left all the other wrappings on. But there are other ways we can find out about how he died.
Ramses may look vaguely familiar to you. In the 1950s, Universal Studios in Hollywood used him as the model for their series of mummy movies, The Mummy's Tomb, The Mummy's Shroud, The Mummy's Curse. But that's not our story. Back to the murder. Ramses isn't obviously damaged, but let's look a little more carefully.
I've got a microfiche of the X-rays of Ramses III. And what I want to do is I want to look at it to see if there's any signs of violence. This is the full body X-ray. And, just quickly, you don't see any broken bones, nothing obvious. But we have to look at the detailed X-rays to see what we can see. Now, let's move it here. This is a cranial view, what we call a lateral. It's from the side. And again, no signs of violence, no signs of trauma. Look at the frontal, next one. Here, again, bones are intact. As we saw with the head, no signs of trauma. Now, let's look over here. This is where you might find some violence. This is the thoracic area. What you're looking at is the way Ramses was buried, like this, right? So you've got the hands here. These are the arm bones, radius ulnar. And often, if you're attacked, you put your arm up in a defensive motion and the bones get broken. But you can see very, very clean lines. No signs of break at all, no signs of violence. There's no trauma there. But let's keep going. This is his abdomen and pelvis, right? Again, no signs of violence, but it's interesting. Look at the spine. It's perfectly parallel, the vertebrae. You see those straight lines? Ramses was carried everywhere. He never had to lift any heavy weights. That is a beautiful spine for somebody his age. But let's see if we can get any signs of violence. Now, this is these are his femurs, the leg bones, right? Again, you can see they're perfectly intact. Interesting, by the way, they're beautiful bones. They're what we call well mineralized. The pharaoh had a good diet. He got all the minerals he needed. But overall, I think it's pretty clear. There's no signs of violence, trauma. Ramses was murdered, but it wasn't by violence.
So how did they kill him? Poison is the first thing that comes to mind. But the poisons available in ancient Egypt were bitter to the taste and easily detected if mixed with food or drink. So I don't think that's how they killed poor Ramses. There's another, more sinister way. Snakes. Snakes were widely used to execute criminals in the ancient world.
Next, how would you smuggle a snake into the royal palace? Watch the plot unravel.
This was the worst possible fate for an Egyptian.
And Mummy Detective Bob Breyer reveals who he thinks Unknown Man E really is.
The answer to how you kill a pharaoh with a deadly snake is waiting for us in a village not far from where Ramses was murdered. There's a snake charmer who does amazing things with even the deadliest snake. Watch what he does to this violent cobra, taming and immobilizing it. can do whatever he wants with it and then revive it. So it's not so far-fetched to think that the conspirators could smuggle a tranquilized snake into Ramses' palace, revive it, and kill him. There's one more bit of evidence that points to death by snakebite. It's in an isolated corner of the Egyptian Museum in Cairo. The statue's battered now, but it was pretty impressive when it was carved.
This is poor old Ramses. He doesn't look like much, but I want to show you something on the side of the statue. Look over here. It's covered with hieroglyphs, and they're all magical. Just like the magic that Ramses' courtiers were using to kill him. Now, what I really want to show you is on the back of the statue, and it's too big to move, but I've got a flashlight, and I've got a mirror, and I think we can do it. Look over here. Can you see the hieroglyph there? It's a snake, and beneath it, there's a semicircle. That means all. This statue is one big magical spell to protect you from all snakes.
Ramses has become the patron saint of snake bites to protect people from the fate he suffered. In spite of all their plotting, magical figures, papyri, and oracle statues, the conspiracy ultimately failed. Our papyrus tells us that Prince Pentawera never took the throne. Another heir to the throne, a prince who was a general in the army, arrived in time to imprison the conspirators. So what happened to the queen, the butler, the treasurer, and their band? They were all arrested and dragged into a great hall and interrogated by the judges. Most of the conspirators were sentenced to death. Their bodies weren't going to be mummified. They were burned alive, their ashes scattered on the road for donkeys to trample upon. This was the worst possible fate for an Egyptian. They were resurrectionists. They believed your body would get up and go again in the next world. With no body to mummify, the conspirators lost all chance of immortality. Even the treasurer Pieri's name was erased from the quarry he once supervised. The queen, the butler, and the treasurer all met grisly ends. But Prince Pentawera, perhaps because he was royal and Ramses' son, was allowed to commit suicide, probably by taking poison. The court record says he took his own life and that no punishment was executed upon him. This could mean his body wasn't destroyed. I bet you've already guessed. I think Unknown Man E, that strange mummy found in the royal cache, is Pentawera. When Gaston Maspero, director of the Antiquity Service, unwrapped Unknown Man E more than a century ago, he described the mummy as dying in hideous agony, his features horribly distorted, surely showed that the wretched man must have been deliberately asphyxiated, probably by being buried alive. Maspero was a great Egyptologist, but he didn't know much about mummies. His scenario is pure fantasy. It's natural for the jaw of a mummy to drop open as tendons and ligaments dry out. If Maspero had walked through the crypts of the Capuchin monks in Palermo, Italy, he would have seen plenty of mummies with jaws gaping, as if they were screaming. There's even another mummy from the royal cache that has the same expression. One of the queens looks as if she's screaming. If our mummy really is Pentawera, we know he wasn't buried alive. The court record tells us he was allowed to commit suicide.
Next, Bob Breyer uncovers the truth behind the mysterious mummy.
He's in better condition than I thought.
I've been tracking Unknown Man E for years. Now I've got him.
He's in better condition than I thought. It's been 100 years since anybody really saw him, and I just didn't know what to expect, but it's in pretty good condition. There's a little bit of signs of some microbes here. There's some infestation here, but for a mummy like this, it's really in pretty good shape. I want to look from the head down. The hair is really unusual. It's braided, and I've never seen any hair quite like this. There's this white, cheesy material in his hair that people talked about, and it's over here too. They seem to have spread some kind of fat on the body and in the hair to preserve him. There was an attempt at preserving him. He wasn't just wrapped in a skin and thrown away. There's an attempt. Now, what's puzzling me here, I want to look at the teeth. The teeth are very important because his bottom molars are in, but the top are not in. What that means is we can pretty well fix his age, because the molars come in after age 21 or so. But I've got a little bit of a surprise here. Look at the top. You see the black stuff on the teeth? That's resin. Somebody made some attempt at mummifying him, and they poured resin in the mouth. See, normally they remove the brain through the nose and then pour resin in to cauterize the area through the nose. But if you look at the nose here, there's no resin at all. There's no signs of resin. So in a kind of desperate attempt at preserving him, they just poured resin down his mouth, and it's on his teeth. It came in through this way. There's none on the bottom teeth. It's on the top teeth, and it pools at the bottom of his mouth. Over here, you can see the hole from an earring. When they found him, he had gold earrings in his ears. So this is a sign of status. And you can see the hole right here. Men and women wore earrings in ancient Egypt after the 18th dynasty. Now, I want to get down to the hands. If you look at the hands, you can see that they were tied together. And you can see the impression left by the rope on both wrists, right? What that means is when they tied his hands, he was still moist, so he hadn't been dehydrated. This was a mummy that they didn't dehydrate. They're simply doing what they can, so they tie his hands together so they'll stay in place. They tie his feet together, and you can still see the rope marks. Now, if you look at the nails, they're rather well manicured. I mean, this was not a laborer. Let me go down to his feet. Let me see what I can see with his feet. There are the toenails. I think, but I'm not sure, but I think his toenails were hennaed. It looks like they prepared his toenails by putting henna on it. I think so. Over here, if you can come over here, come close. This is where you would normally have the incision that the embalmers made to remove the internal organs, right? And there's clearly no incision. So the internal organs aren't removed. They're left in, and somebody is trying to mummify him as best they can. They put a little resin in, they put some fatty material on the body. He is wrapped. And then the strange thing, he's wrapped here in a sheepskin. Let me show you the skin. And I don't quite understand how somebody this big is wrapped in a skin that small. Maybe it's just around the groin area. It's not. It's amazing to me that this is even used in a mummification. So I'm just wondering how they did it. The position of the hands is also important. This is how they position the hands after the 18th dynasty. So this is a mummy that comes after the 18th dynasty. He's about the right period for us. He's probably 20th dynasty or so, which is Ramses III's period. So all of it suggests that this could indeed be Pentaweret. I mean, it really could be. It's a very interesting mummy.
But how did the body of a disgraced criminal end up in a royal cache with the kings of Egypt? Come with me to a tomb in the Valley of the Kings, and I'll show you.
This is a pharaoh's tomb. It had plenty of side chambers. Once they were packed with everything the pharaoh needed for the next world. They believed you could literally take it with you. This is just the perfect place to hide a prince. Let me tell you what I think happens. Pentaweret commits suicide. He's not mummified. He's not given a coffin. He's just wrapped in a sheepskin. But somebody cares about him. Remember, he's got brothers and he's got sisters. So they decide to hide him in a side chamber in the Valley of the Kings.